I wonder if you'd start with giving us just a little resume, a brief resume of your life story, just in a few minutes.
I'm sure everybody would agree that that would be impossible for any of us to give a resume of our lives, and especially for most of you, our coming out journeys. I won't go into the detail, but I would like you to imagine for a second being in a civil war, where you see building collapsing, people being shot every single day. And you are 19 years old, being brought up in a normal family, in a normal country, enjoying the freedom and anything that peace brings us. Out of the blue, you start experiencing bombs. You start experiencing people that you grew and you loved suddenly turn to enemies. And you start questioning what love is. That lasted for about 14 months without knowing that I will ever breathe again, without knowing whether I will ever see my family again, and without knowing why. And surely most of us here would agree that when something like that happens to any human being, the first question we ask ourselves, why? Any life adversity. Now, after 14 months, fortunately for myself, not many people actually survived the war, especially where I was in former Yugoslavia. I ended up in the streets of London, homeless for about 4.5 months, emotionally destroyed. I could not speak English. So that was another battle I had to overcome, with no family, with no friends, and about 200 Deutschmarks back in the 1990 in my pocket. And I had no idea what God is. I have totally lost any faith in myself, in the universe, in God, in humanity. So there was nothing human left in my body. Yet there was a voice inside of me that believed in the 4-letter word LOVE. The next 10 years I spent sort of trying to get my life back together to what a normal person would perceive to have a life, where you start having, first of all, a roof over your head, a clean bath, a shower, toothpaste, the most basic things that we use daily, but we never think about the people globally who are not as fortunate as we might be. So I spent the next 10 years working about average 20 hours every single day with no holiday, no break, to get myself back into track, both emotionally, mentally. I paid for a lot of my education because I wasn't really entitled at a time as an illegal refugee, because my refugee status wasn't really dealt for almost 9 years. So all of my education was private. So I had to hold on for 3 jobs to get myself back into the education system, get a degree, and get a job. Then when that happened, it was all things came together. Because I got my refugee status at the same time when I got my first job, where I volunteered, because nobody would employ me in the corporate world because I did not have the work experience. And my work experience was cleaning dishes, working in a restaurant, working in clubs, working in bars, working any job but the corporate world. So then I spent the next 10 years in the corporate world. I built in a very, very successful career, going from being a team maker to being top CIO in some of the top private and public companies here. And I spent 2 more years until another massive life adversity just hit me. And surely some of you might have experienced redundancy in 2008, 2009. Any hands? Okay, a few of you. So when I felt that my life suddenly had a meaning, suddenly the whole corporation pulled the plug underneath me. And I almost ended up again in the streets of London. So that's in a nutshell, without going really in the detail of what really happened in the last 26 years.
So you hit a rock bottom point there with the recession time, but clearly things have changed since then. This was a catalyst in some way for your church, and I wish to ask you as well how, if you could share a little bit, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about how your coming out story features in that.
Yes, I mean, I guess, you know, they do say sometimes when everything runs very smoothly, the universe has a way to just slap us in our face and say, wake up, you know. You'll have to go back down and make your way up. And being made redundant was one of the greatest catalysts that happened. Not just that, because I wasn't really comfortable with my sexuality up to that point. So I was even forced into my own culture to marry. And I became the unhappiest person on the planet. And with breaking of the marriage and coming up to a family where basically there's no acceptance at all about my sexuality, coming from a family with a good reputation, good background, going through the war, surviving the war, from a Muslim background, it was very, very strong feelings, and there's no way that you could really face that. And that led me to almost commit suicide. Actually, I did try to commit suicide, but something happened so magically in the mountains in Macedonia that made me believe back into spirituality, into there's something higher force that we don't experience unless we either extremely physically ill or something really magically happens to us. I literally tried to jump off the mountain where a force pushed me back. And it was a snap light and a voice that told me a few things, which I talk about in my next book called #Loneliness, The Virus of Modern Age. And I went home, I meditated in the mountain, crying for about 5 hours, really saying I did not believe up to that point there is something really higher power than everybody talks, but you've never experienced. And from that moment, I went home and I faced the greatest fears in my life, to face the people who brought you into this world, who rejected you with all their being. I had a gun on my forehead, I had a knife on my neck, and I just said, you can kill me, that's it. I've already been killed. And I walked away and I never looked back. That at the same time, I lost my job. At the same time, it created this, I would say, a volcano. If you could imagine the biggest volcano on the planet that suddenly erupts and on its way destroys everything, which created the opportunity that I today have manifested, and also bringing back myself into that authentic space, speaking my truth without any fear, and being myself without the approval any human being on this planet, not just my mother or my family.
So clearly coming out to yourself, accepting yourself, and sharing that with the important people in your life seems to have released a lot of energy for you. It seems to have catapulted your career and your spiritual growth on phenomenally, to the point that you are now an author and traveling the world teaching.
Yes.
Do you have any thoughts about the link between the homosexuality and the spirituality that empowered that fed that journey?
Absolutely. Whether it's about homosexuality or you as a human being from any race or religion background, if you cannot be true to who you are, if you cannot speak your truth, if you cannot honor the being that you are, there's no way you can be spiritual. You're only lying to yourself. And speaking your truth and honoring yourself and honoring your sexuality, because it's who we are. It's not something that, I was told that I got infected by homosexuality. And, my own family said to me, England made me homosexual. That's, and then they would find any excuse. I was taken to hospitals to cut part of my brain, to priests to really take this homosexuality out of me. So it's sort of until you truly honor that and you create that inner peace, as much as you would try to become any form of spiritual person that connects with the heart, you cannot reach that level of the heart until you are truthful to who you are.
Exactly. I think that's a really, really, really crucial message that the whole world needs to hear. That it's not just about being gay and queer. This is about being true to yourself. This is something we can demonstrate to the world. Now, love has become very much a central feature of your work and teaching, as it is with mine. I spend a lot of time at gatherings where large groups of people, large numbers of people, fall in love with each other, where you discover that you can be in love with 50, with dozens, with 100 people at once, with your heart so wide open. We create these queer spiritual spaces where we're able to drop the attitudes and the restrictions that the outside world places on us, and allow the real self, the genuine self, to come through and the heart to shine. Now, you write very powerfully in your book about the practice of self-love.
Yep.
And I take it to a level with these kind of gatherings where we're looking at, well, we are all the self. So in fairies we have a term, subject consciousness, which is that I recognize that you are another me, and I am another you. That what is happening inside you is exactly the same as in me. You're not an object for me to make use of and get pleasure from. You are another me in that body with all the same desires,
Yep.
and love, and taking the fact that self-love is a universal potential.
It's what life is created from. And unless we honor that, we not really honor the intelligence that's behind what creates us all.
So what do we mean by love without boundaries? The theme of, and I'm going to invite your input on this in a moment too, if you'd like to. What do we mean by love without boundaries, the theme of this conversation?
What I've noticed, not just in my personal journey, but with working with thousands and thousands of people globally, we tend to associate love only with the good things. And having studied quantum physics and science and having done a lot of spiritual work, I've come to understand and believe that love is both pain and pleasure combined together in equal measures. Now, it's sort of, when we look at the love as an energy, at its purest form, it does not have gender, it does not have rights and wrongs. So therefore, this is the pure light that lives in each one of us. Yet, we've been taught from a very young age to distinguish what's bad and what's good. And when we have what's bad and what's good, we're not really truly present. We're not really in that moment of gratitude and grace and love. We're only experiencing those moments in a tiny moments during the day. When I've had spoken and worked intensively with clients, the greatest problem they have is distraction. And our thoughts and our emotions and everything that we are surrounded by distracting us. So therefore, for us to really experience that love, unconditional love, it's really we have to learn to practice presence within ourselves and be not intruding to other people's thoughts and beliefs. Because the first thing we love to do is we love to judge, and we love to create opinions, and we love to create meanings, instead of actually reflecting back within ourselves and us when we are stimulated by something, saying, what is it, this message telling me about me? Where am I in my own journey? If I'm being, I would say, challenged by a word, or somebody comes to me with a judgment, or calls me a homosexual, or calls me whatever it might be, I just look at them, what you said beautifully earlier on, just another version of myself on a journey until they reach the heart level. Because once you reach the heart level, you observe every human being as version of yourself with so much purity and so much love that you have nothing left for you to judge.
I want to imagine this. Imagine that the whole of LGBT life embraced this concept. We're so notorious for our objectification of each other, especially gay men, and our hedonism, our drug abuse, etc. This is always the story. And often that we're hearing, and often that talk about sexual excess and drug abuse often focuses on what's wrong with us. Why is there something wrong with us, making us want so much fun? But something doesn't quite compute there. Maybe we want so much fun because there's something very positive in us that wants to be born. I believe that the whole of gay life is a search for the self, whether it's falling in love, whether it's getting high with drugs, going out and dancing. We're on these mission to discover what's inside us. Supposing we had a culture that celebrated the discovery of what's inside us, then maybe we wouldn't be, we'd be more conscious about how we could do it, realize there are many ways to explore what's inside us. It doesn't want it to be unconscious and chemically enhanced.
Yep. I have worked with a lot of people who go through a lot of drug abuse, and I observed myself in the 90s when I was totally rejected by the people who brought me into this world. So in a natural search to find a community to be myself was the gay community in London. But I never really felt part of it in a way when it came to all the drugs and all the sex parties and all of that. And I'm not saying that because I say something right or wrong, because I don't believe in that. I'm saying that because each one of us has a certain way of actually believing what our life needs to be. Drugs might bring in a lot of gay people that desire that is very suppressed, and therefore they find that moment of love and expression. And I've met a lot of people who've done drugs for 10 years and suddenly bang, no more drugs. So for me, it's sort of, personally, I would say even legalize drugs and be educated people about drugs. But for us to go into that journey of self-discovery and actually finding ourselves, the true authentic self, it is essential for us to listen within ourselves.
I believe I came to the spiritual discovery kind of the hard way. I had to get really, really sick in order to let go of the outer world and turn within. I see there's such an energy in gay life pushing us to this point of realization, and it gets a lot of people through the drug use.
Yep.
You end up really heavily dependent or addicted on drugs. The only way out is kind of through the bottom, and to start looking internally and discovering the truth about the self. But supposing we had a culture that was celebrating more that we're all butterflies. We're all butterflies in a process. You don't have to go through the crisis stage to emerge as the butterfly, to move from the gay caterpillar to the fully formed imago butterfly. The cocoon doesn't have to be a crisis. There's a quote on the wall up at the back there. It says, "How does one become a butterfly?" she asked pensively. The answer was, you must want to fly so much that you're willing to give up being a caterpillar. 21st century gay culture can celebrate that we're on a constant journey of transformation and growth. Coming out is a step on the journey. It's not the end of the journey. I thought it was the end of the journey. I came out, all I have to do now is have fun, fall in love. I was an atheist. I was an atheist from the age of 12 to the age of 30, hard-line atheist. But I believed in love. There was something instinct in me that told me, I don't need this to be told, religion's telling me what to do, but I'm still driven by love. And I believe that's what kept me alive during the years I had AIDS. I had a very, very deep, loving relationship with a French partner. I believe our love for each other is what kept us alive while we were living with 0 T cells for a few years. So, awakening. I just wanted to mention the concept of awakening. For me, I went from this atheist state to literally like opening my mind to the universe for the first time. So, what's it all about? I then realized that I also had to open my heart if I also wanted to discover what it was all about. And this is what produced this trigger of awakening to the multidimensional reality. Awakening is a word you use a lot as well. Yep. So it's a thrill to be up on stage here and discussing the concept of awakening. For me, 20 years after the awakening began, I was running around South London saying, there is a spirit after all. It's a multi-dimensional reality and love is the doorway. And they literally, people wanted to lock me away. I know, it's strange. Right? 20 years later, here we are talking about it.
Yep.
Does anybody in the audience also have something, a tale or experience of awakening in their lives that they're prepared to share a few words with the group today?
Let me rephrase that. Everybody has one. Just, are you willing to share?
What I think is struck me when you
Basmir? Bas here.
Sorry?
Your name Basir?
My name is Bashir.
Yeah,
Bashir.
yeah.
One of the things which struck me just now when you were talking about it is, in my experience, the way you were talking about it was that awakening is a singular moment. And my experience is something which has to be rediscovered again and again and again. It's not something which happens. It's more like a verb than a noun. That it keeps happening. So this journey which you talk about is a journey of
Awakening.
awakening, but
It's a journey.
it's awakening which keeps on happening.
Absolutely.
And you take 3 steps forward and 2 steps back, and
Yes.
and 2 steps forward, and then you forget it completely, and then you come back to it again.
You've just created a dance of life.
Thank you, Bashir. Yeah, I resonate with that. When I speak about it, I'm aware it sounds like a moment, but that moment for me, and it was a dramatic turning point in my life, but that moment lasted 6 months. And it was totally what you're describing, a rising, falling. At the end of those 6 months, I knew that my life was entirely changed. It still took several years to integrate. And as I do healing work with people, that's what I realize is, yes, we can get these moments, these epiphany moments of breakthrough, but you've then got to integrate it, and that's what takes time. It's not going to happen like that. Personally, I work with the Wheel of the Year. I believe nature offers us all that we need to know to integrate this higher knowledge into our being through the Wheel of the Year. The seasons show us when to take in more things, when to let go of things. Anybody else? Yeah, please.
I thought it was really interesting you were talking. I loved your positive spin on being gay and clubbing and all that as this quest for who we are. And it's interesting that as gay people, we're also afflicted with quite a lot of difficult illnesses. So there's been HIV, now there's Hep C with sex. I just had cancer, throat cancer, which I just finished radiotherapy and chemo and stuff in January, and that was from HPV, which is becoming more and more common amongst gay men through HPV infection because none of us were vaccinated because they just thought it was a girl's thing. And that was, I think I'm still going through that process of integrating what that experience was about for me. But similarly, in a way to you, I think I'd gone through a lot of life taking everything for granted and being a bit Eeyore-ish about life, a bit glass half empty. I'm not really sure if I wanted to be here, and a bit of self-pity. You know, life had been a bit challenging for me, and sometimes being gay can be challenging, and all that stuff. And it really forced me to make a concrete decision: do I want to be alive, or do I not want to be alive? And then when I've made the decision that I definitely do want to be alive, how do I want to be alive? It's no life to be glass half empty, and that then made me realise that any given situation or experience that we have in life, there's a 360-degree viewpoint on that situation or experience, and we can choose where we stand to look at it anywhere between entirely positive to entirely negative. It doesn't mean I'm completely Pollyanna-ish about everything now and skipping around saying everything's wonderful. Now I'm going through an integrative experience where I haven't got the axe over my head quite so much. I've got through the worst bit. I'm having to then learn to try to see the positive and the blessings in life, but also to try and live in the now. I think I spent my whole life doing what a lot of, I know, gay men do, I can't speak for others, which is, you know, that velvet rage stuff. Looking for the perfect house, the perfect body, the status, the job. And actually what I've found more recently is that triggers a load of gay shame in me. If I go into Soho, I was in Far Island over the summer, which was a terrible mistake. Surrounded by people with big houses and big jobs and big cars and big egos, and it just triggers all my shame. And I've realised that actually that's not what it's all about. And for us, as you say, as gay people, we're forced to find out who we are and what we value and what it means to not fit into society or those norms, and therefore what do we want to be, and that gives us enormous freedom if we want to take it. Yeah. So I guess these afflictions are enormously positive in many ways. For me, I see the cancer as a really positive experience.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Richard.
What I'd like to share to that is it's kind of the awakening through suffering, the transcendence through suffering, the awakening is kind of the Piscean model. We're at the end of the age of Pisces, folks. It's been 2,000 years of suffering, in case you hadn't noticed. It's a case of getting to the light through the dark, through the channel of emotional Piscean waters. We're now entering the age of Aquarius. Here the potential is to embrace transformation through joy. And if there's any group of people that the consciousness has evolved on this planet to bring that message to the world, I believe it's the gay community. A lot of spirituality on this planet is a little serious. I love making spaces where, yeah, we can do our meditation, we can do our healing, we can do our inner work, but we can also express the natural joy in us, but have fun doing it. Spirituality is not about obeying the rules. It's about listening and being and expressing yourself and having a good time doing it, I hope.
Absolutely.
Now, Tony, let me just say, anybody else wanting to come in? Okay. Tony, you do a lot of work with the corporate level. Your background in the corporate field before this awakening time meant that you already had connections and contacts there that you could develop. And I believe you're doing some great work to bring healing and awareness to what many of us see as a challenging area of human society.
Yeah.
A lot of spiritual people don't have a great opinion, actually, on the corporate world, on the financial world. A lot of us see those people in those corporations as really being very abusive of the planet and of the people and inhabitants of the planet. So I've got this question for you.
I'm waiting.
Do you perceive from your work that the light, that the awakening is happening in those fields, in those areas of the world? Do you believe that the corporate world can reform itself in such a way that it wakens to the higher truth and serves the interests of the whole, the interests of the planet, rather than the interests of the few? Do you think this is possible, or do we have to have a revolution?
I'm sure you all will agree with me. When somebody gives you a choice, you have to think about it. If you didn't give me a choice, I'll go straight in the answer. But now that you've given me a choice, I would say it's both. The typical example I use when it comes to non-believers or people who have an opinion about the corporate world that it's not ready spiritually. I'm not negating what you've just said, but in my view, there is no darkness in the presence of light. And when we are in that light within ourselves, no matter where you go, even in the corporate world, you shine light into the darkness. So therefore, no matter who you approach, the darkness will simply disappear in the presence of light. Now, there's two effects in there when I meet people. One, they get blinded by my light because I would reflect straight away what their issues are. And therefore, imagine a person in the cave who's never seen the light and comes out, and the first thing is they get blinded. But eventually, love and light will penetrate every cell in your body when you're in the presence of somebody who's just loving. You might not feel it in the moment. You might get challenged, or you might get emotions. Corporate world is no different to me. And yes, there's a lot to be done in the corporate world. And yes, there's a lot of awakening in there. Yes, the spiritual concept is not really something that normally is spoken in the corporate world. And sometimes, certain people, I'm not speaking about myself, but they have to tone down their language. The moment you mention anything to do with spirituality or religion, which I believe everybody is free to do whatever they want with their lives, they almost shut the door, no matter how good you are. But I walked away from the corporate world and from everything that wasn't authentic. So for me personally, I do not tone down my language, and I do work with some of the top CEOs around the world who actually embrace all of the teachings that I do and embrace spirituality. As a result of that, they're becoming much better leaders and much more mindful leaders. But I personally do not go with the idea that they're not spiritual, because that's on its own for anybody who says to themselves they judge. They really need to reflect back in themselves, because our job is really to clean our own mirror. It's not for us to really look outwardly and say the corporate world is not embracing this or it's that. I spent a year hating the corporate world. When you have been taken the job out of the blue, you have to pay mortgage, you have dependents from a war zone that you have to pay every month, and there are no simply jobs. There weren't jobs in 2009. I was like a volcano inside of me. After almost investing about £1 million in corporate taxes for the work that I did for 20 years. And suddenly I was taught that I'm only entitled 65 quid support. That was what really got me to think when people in this country believe that we have a great social system. Yes, if you compare it with third world Africa, but not if you compare it with some of the top worlds like Sweden and Stockholm, where basically things like this do not happen. You are looked after if you lose your job, if you are really made redundant. So it's up to each one of us in this room and globally to work in ourselves and therefore transcend those skills and our spirituality with whoever we meet without any fear.
So you kind of think that they might come along, they might stop us using the planet's resources so much.
We
stop
have
taking all the
a
money.
different view in there, because I don't think, I know from the bottom of my heart, this is only the beginning of the awakening that happens globally on the planet for the shifts and the changes that I've experienced in the fourth and fifth dimensions. Things that most people are not really aware of. It requires tremendous discipline to be able to connect to higher energies and bring about healing in cancer, bring about healing in HIV. And the intelligence that we are born has the capacity to heal us. It's just we have not been taught at that level of being able, on a cellular level, to bring in healing. And that only can happen if we truly resonate in that gratitude and love.
I agree entirely. I believe the awakening process, as you say, is at the early stages. What I understood 20 years ago when it happened for me is I was one of the advanced party that had incarnated in the planet to wake up a bit earlier than some other people and then help other people awaken. Of course, I'd found those that had already awakened before me. In the 1960s, I had a whole wave of people that awoken to the higher consciousness and are quietly doing their work in various retreat centers or places around the planet. I got to connect with those and see myself as being part of the next generation of awakeners. Now 20 years on, I'm looking out and I'm seeing like a wave happening everywhere I look, a wave of openness to spiritual awareness. But for gay culture, wow, it feels like a big hill to climb, huh? There's a massive energy of hedonism, of superficiality, of abuse going out there. How do we light the fire? How do we light the spiritual fire for gay people and bring this joy that we experience from our own spiritual work into that life? If you've got ideas, please get in touch.